koutou, haere mai, and welcome along to Showy Ovaries, being recorded in the midst of this early spring Antarctic vortex. I hope your bits haven't frozen off, but Showy Ovaries is a podcast where I, teetering on the brink of falling headlong into the menopause era, Penny Ashton, learn all I can before my ovaries turn into fossils and secrete their estrogen no more. A quick reminder, as always, that I am not a doctor, and my BA had barely enough contact time for my tutors to probably even know my name, though I did spend a lot of time at the Nio Marsh Theatre, where I did 14 shows in 3 years, and am bummed this year I couldn't go to the Canterbury Musical Society's, Musocs, 50th year celebration. So as I'm performing a musical as a professional, it seems to have some sort of nice synchronicity. But hello to all of you doing that. But if you need medical advice instead of singing warm-ups, then please do start with your GP or menopause specialist and then go from there. Today's guest may not be a doctor, but my word, she has become incredibly well-versed in the human body's reaction to a certain, not very novel coronavirus, and unwillingly, but now wholeheartedly, has become a bit of a figurehead in trying to ascertain what exactly long COVID is and the condition's trajectory, and pertinently to this podcast, its effects on hormones. Jenene Crossan, Ngāi Tahu, is one of the very first patients to have COVID-19 in New Zealand. And when she posted about it on Instagram, she also got a tidal wave of hatred and bullying, which is just fucking ridiculous. Even when Jenene was so fatigued she could only function a few hours a day, she was dealing with that sort of bullshit. She caught the virus as she was coming back to New Zealand from London, possibly from a dinner 2 nights before she left. She's not sure, but she arrived on March 15th, 2020. A few days later, she developed COVID and then had a brutal bout that knocked her out for about a month. But rather than recovering fully, she has had lingering effects ever since. As a founder of numerous startups, including New Zealand Girl 25 years ago, that I actually had a column on for like about a year. Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, that's right. That was a while ago. And then lately, Flossy.com, which she is CEO and co-founder of, which is a global technology company providing solutions for enterprise hair and beauty product brands, including L'Oreal and Estee Lauder. She knows how to organize, and so she is leading the long COVID support advocacy group and now works between Auckland, Otago, and Victoria universities to collaborate on ways to improve the experiences for patients, research, and medical pathway development, and what she calls a true lemonade creation out of a sour lemon. I'm nearly finished. We've still 2 little paragraphs to go. She is energized by the spark of change in the air for a brighter culture in the future through connection and vulnerability, and is focused on building stronger communities through mana enhancement. Jenene lives in Piha with her husband, daughters, dogs, cats, and sheep, and she's beaming into me, that sounds wrong, here in Palmy through the wonders of technology, which she knows so much about. So, after an epic introduction, please welcome the one and only Jenene Crossan. Hooray! Kia ora. That's quite a lot, wasn't it?
Kia ora. Yes. Yeah,
it's a lot to get through. It is a lot to get through. So first of all, how the fuck are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's all relative though, isn't it? I mean, it's fair to say I'm hot.
Right.
You said there's a vortex of cold going through. Oh, bring it on. Let me find this refrigerator and I'd like to just move in.
Right. So your temperature gauge is awry, shall we say?
My temperature gauge is completely and utterly dysfunctional. It has disappeared. It has packed its bags and it has fucked off out of my life. So
right, I see. And how is the COVID situation?
Well, I call this my situation.
Yeah, well, how are you?
Not the royal we.
Okay, well, no, yeah, not the royal we. You. How is your COVID situation now?
Yeah. I call it long COVID ramifications now. So if you were to put it into buckets of the long COVID immediate things that people, which is hilarious for the terminology long COVID, but the things that most people kind of generally have around that happen to them, the fatigue and the headaches and the joint pain and the brain fog,
right?
Get that word up, etc. A lot of that, in theory, has lifted and has just morphed its way into menopause.
Yeah, because they're like such quintessential menopause symptoms as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, mine's a little bit more complicated in the sense that, so my comorbidities, one of the reasons I had such a strong reaction to COVID is endometriosis. Little
Right.
known fact, inflammation disease meets inflammatory virus. Two things they actually got along famously, and they
Right.
dragged me down with it. And so, unfortunately, that created a whole bunch of issues for me in my gut and my pelvis and my gynecological region, which led through the course of several surgeries over a period of time to have my last ovary be taken out. Like, I'd already had a hysterectomy before COVID, but I'd had one ovary left. So they took that out in March last year after trying to save it, along with a whole variety of gut issues and several procedures on that. And they put me on HRT, and that was great for a year until I started to have period pain, which is kind of impressive considering I didn't have a uterus.
Yes.
And so I, lo and behold, fell into the small category of people who managed to grow endometriosis off HRT, because HRT essentially is estrogen being put into your body. I obviously still had some endometriosis cells left in my body, and they flourished. So HRT and I were not allowed to be friends any longer.
Oh, bugger.
And so they took me off it, and I went headlong into surgical menopause, which is the least fun way to go into menopause,
Yeah.
because it's all on all at once. And yeah, so there's kind of like a flaring of things that have happened. And so now I'm in the throes of heat.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I'd like to call it irritability. And my husband might call it plain bitchiness. But
Yes. No, you're just like, you're not suffering fools. Let's say it that way.
No. The funny thing is, I've actually got an amazing amount of calm right now.
Oh, good.
Someone road raged me the other day, and I looked at them serenely. So there's something definitely really funky going on with my hormones, or lack of.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you the first question that I ask everybody, which is segueing into all of this, which is, what has your relationship with your body been like in your life, and what journey has it been on?
Yeah, wow, that's a really great question. I feel like I had a really solid relationship with my body through the very important teenage years. And like, I didn't fall into some of the traps that a lot of my peers did in regards to body shaming and self-shaming, and diets and diet culture and all the rest that went with the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate, but I obviously still managed to digest a fair amount of this because it came out in other ways. I feel like I must have taken on board and decided what I believed a perfect body looked like. And it wasn't until mine stopped sort of performing like that that I really got my head around where it was falling down. So, I mean, I made the erroneous decision at the age of 29 to get a couple of large bolt-ons at the front.
So you were 29, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was 29. It was a present to myself. Hilarious, though. Empowered decision.
I know, it's that whole thing. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I look back on and go,
Yeah. And we're talking about breast implants here, in case that wasn't obvious. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because I've got a friend that recently got them, and I was like, I was just perplexed. Yeah, I was really perplexed. And that's because my nickname at primary school was Big Tits at primary school.
Well, so mine was like inverted tire because I had so little. I know the boys are very, very cruel.
Fucking, yeah.
Weird.
Boys, exactly. And that over-sexualization of me and potentially under-sexualization of you, know, and it's so bullshit. But anyway, so you decided to get implants. And did they make you happy for a while?
Oh, yeah, I loved them. Loved them.
What size did you go to?
Oh, biggest you could have. They were huge.
Because I'm a double G.
Well, I was easily that, right. But also my frame has always been tall, I'm full size, but I was missing boobs. And so for me, it felt like it completed the bit that they'd somehow forgotten the factory when I was being made. So I used to joke about it. It's like, they're just putting it right. And I loved them. And my friends used to tell me to stop fondling them because I thought they were so great. But I really enjoyed them. And I had this really positive experience for a really long time with them, which I know seems like now a little bit counterintuitive. And don't worry, there's a big payback for this eventually. So I went through all this, and then as my world imploded from a body point of view, there was this realization that they had to go.
You mean like with COVID, or?
Well, yeah, because one of the things that happens with long COVID is mast cell activation syndrome, which is basically when your your allergies are turning on to 2 for 4 all the time. So, you might have a reaction to grass or a cat and a dog or something like that, and you have some sort of reaction. And when you're having a very severe reaction is when you get into the, anaphylactic reaction kind of category. Now, I've had some of these in the past because I was allergic to bees and wasps. Don't know if I still am. My parents put me through a desensitization program when I was for about 5 years, from about 8 to 13. But I nearly died as an 8-year-old. So there's a whole background of all this stuff. But basically what it says, that I have this ability to have a reaction to things. And so when we were trying to work out what on earth was going wrong with my body post-COVID, where I was essentially allergic to everything, we now know that's mast cell activation syndrome, which is being triggered in people with long COVID. Then we didn't know that. And so there was this huge process of elimination of like, well, is it anything? What am I eating? I lost so much weight. I lost 13 kg from lack of being able to eat.
Oh, right.
And of course, then is the moment everybody goes, oh, you look fabulous.
Oh God, that's so shit, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, totally. Oh, look at you. You've
You look great.
And you've been at the forefront of figuring out so much with COVID, which I know is shit. Thank you on the behalf of everyone else. But oh my God, that's a lot for you.
Yeah. So we took them out, thinking because of course there's this theory that not theory. There's a lot of science behind it. There's this breast implant illness issue that's happening to some people, which is essentially the same thing. It's triggering autoimmune issues.
Right.
So I had to go. I've got to roll it out. They got to go.
Yeah, well.
And so the same year I had my last ovary taken out, I had my boobs taken out. So you imagine I started at the beginning of the year feeling pretty, well, I mean, not great, but I still, I had from a body and aesthetics point of view, looked and felt the part. By the end of the year, I'd lost my boobs and lost my ovaries. I had none of my bits left. I mean, it was quite a mind shift.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially somebody that founded New Zealand Girl,
NZ Girl, just to be very clear, NZ Girl. Because the other one is actually New Zealand Girl was always a porn site.
Good. It's good. I always say, because hotpink.co.nz is my website, but hotpink.com also very different place. So, okay, so NZ Girl. So to end up, and then do you start to for me, I don't feel like these are part of what defines me as a woman, but I can see that some of that stuff could play into it. Did you feel anything like that?
Clearly I had subscribed to that idea, and I didn't realize how much, and this is the unpacking and unpicking I've had to do over the last year essentially, where I've realized that I had completely internalized this concept of what the 90s, aesthetic should look like.
Pamela
big
Anderson.
Boobs. Exactly. And then you go watch the Tommy Pam situation, which was terribly under consented, but nonetheless the concept around how badly treated she was and how much she was just part of the product of the machine as well. And so it really gave me some pause. But I feel like part of the difficulty through all of this, of course, is that I feel like I've been robbed of age, because I'm only 44 and I was only 42 when I had the hysterectomy for a start. And so, I'd already kind of been robbed of my fertility. I was unable to have biological babies. IVF had failed miserably, and I'd had 10 surgeries, all the stuff that had happened.
Because of endo.
So yes, exactly. And so I feel like I've been suddenly catapulted into a category for women that is well beyond my years. Typically don't go into menopause, until mid-ish, 50s. And I'm now 44.
However, I think that's buying into some stuff as well, right?
Possibly,
because
right?
The average age of menopause is 51, and a lot of women go between anything from a couple to 10 years of perimenopause beforehand.
Right, of course, that's true.
So that is also buying into what makes a woman old, which actually isn't menopause.
Oh, There's so much unpacking to be done, right?
Yeah, not to invalidate how you feel, but that is also part of the machine. And what gets me, it wasn't just the 90s, right? It was the early 2000s. I mean, the 2000s was a shit show. I feel like Paris Hilton's boyfriend leaks their sex tape and she's the slut. Britney Spears is a sex symbol at whatever she was, 16, or she was on the Mickey Mouse Club. I mean, that shit was appalling, and it's just been endless. I feel like it might be slowing down now, but all of that's feeding into your I need some bigger boobs, even though obviously Paris Hilton didn't have very big boobs. But
Yeah, that's one thing she didn't do. It's interesting, though, isn't it?
yeah.
She's always been quite positive, on positive on that front. But
Mm.
yes, and look, I somewhere along there, interestingly enough, lost my Instagram account. I had a reasonable following. I don't know, 4-something thousand, tiny, New Zealand something.
4 times as much as me. So yes,
But you know
well
what I mean,
done.
like 153 million Kim Kardashian or whatever, like, but I lost it through to anti-vaxxers, and so which is a blessing in disguise
How
because
do you lose it? You just decided you
well,
couldn't be fucked anymore?
no, like literally Instagram took it off me. Like I logged in one day and they had cancelled my account and there was no getting it back. So all my photos, everything was gone, and the only thing I got told was that there had been complaints about my content. And so if there's enough complaints about content, that basically this is how it rolls.
Oh, you
And
see, I'm having an issue with
yeah,
Facebook at the moment myself about various other things, and it's appalling. They are so
mm,
happy to take our money, but
yeah,
the absolute lack of consumer concern and care is bullshit. But you're saying
yeah.
it's a blessing.
Well, it's a blessing because I feel like with Instagram, there's a much stronger algorithm around aesthetics, and that is, obviously pulling into showing you more things that you want to buy, and into the culture of consumption, and I found myself being surrounded through that with a lot more of the what I want versus what I need, and so actually having that taken out of my world, which I don't think I would have been able to quit that easily because it's a form of addiction in itself,
Mm,
that having it taken away was just so much easier. And so actually I've made the switch to TikTok because I want to keep up with the kids,
right. Mm.
because I can't fall too far behind. But I've found myself following much more body positive people, and there's far less body shaming and a lot more inclusiveness, and it's taught me a lot of things. And I mean, in general, I am trying to part ways with my ableist background
Right.
and my views of the way that I used to think that I was supposed to show up.
Right.
Because I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to take time. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not something I can just flip a switch. I mean, you
The
notice.
programming is epic.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I was fat
yeah.
with massive tits, according to and then get judged for that, and told not to talk about my breasts so much in comedy because it was alienating to the poor men in the audience.
Oh dear.
But then also told that I had to appeal to men in comedy if I wanted to be on television more.
Surely talking about your boobs is going to do that.
I'd have thought so, but maybe I was getting a bit old at that point. I don't fucking know. But, it's like, I know. And all that mixed messaging. And then you just go, oh, no wonder I'm fucked up about stuff like
Yeah,
this. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So do you think that you're coming to a better place, though, now?
Absolutely not.
Oh,
No.
oh shit.
No, I like to think I am. Like I'm kind of going through my wardrobe, taking things out that I've been holding on to for this idea of a smaller. Oh, by the way, the 13 kg I lost, I found.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I found it again and a few more because, of course, that's what happens when you take away all your estrogen from your body, and suddenly it's
Yes.
like, oh, hello,
Yes.
spare tire.
Yes. Right.
And that's what's keeping me so warm. So I'm trying to systematically move things out of my wardrobe that might be taunting me,
Yeah.
and gone with, you know what, maybe later in life, if that for whatever reason happened, I can, fine, I'll upgrade and change. And I'm just sort of trying to change my view of like what looks good on me. I've cut all my hair off and now I can't stand it, and I'm doing it all again. And so I'm kind of
Right.
just, I feel like there's a process of metamorphosizing myself, but it's non-linear. It's a bit clumpy and lumpy, and surprisingly few tears, which I'm still bamboozled about.
Okay. Maybe. Oh, that
Yeah,
sounds good. I mean, obviously, I think your hair looks fabulous, but it doesn't matter what I say. I know that. I like the pink bits
yeah.
because that's definitely my. I like pink bits. Yeah, but but it's about what you look in the mirror and that what you want to see, but then learning to love what's there, which and that's the thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm moved to tell you that you look fabulous, but then it shouldn't matter. But but this is the world that we live in, and with
Mm.
NZ Girl and things like that, you would have been. It just amazes me the stuff, the psychology around beauty in
Oh,
that
yeah.
we all want to be
Mhm.
beautiful. We all want to have
Mhm.
partners that are beautiful that we are attracted to. But if anyone is too beautiful, they are stupid. They must be
Mhm.
stupid. And if you let yourself go, you're disgusting. But if you try too hard, you're ridiculous. It's like
Mhm.
this perennial, and I guess it's all about trying to sell us shit to make us all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's just sort of
Mm-hmm.
bonkers, all that shit that we buy into. So does your
Yeah.
husband help you with this stuff?
No, not even remotely.
Okay.
No. He's terrible.
Okay. He's
I think
terrible?
he's terrible. No, he's lovely. I love him. But I mean, let's be honest, it's a really hard thing for them to get their head around because, when you're kind of acting a little bit crazy, it's hard for them to think you're doing anything other than acting a little bit crazy. And he wants to be more understanding, but I'm really great at pushing his buttons when that happens.
Right, okay.
So and then he has the audacity to be like a furnace in bed.
Yes, I've heard this a lot. What my husband does is he's not overly sweaty, but honestly, his side of the bed has this yellow, like when you take the sheets off. He hasn't listened to my podcast of late, so I don't care. I could talk about this because he used to listen when he was commuting to work, but now he cycles every day. But yeah, it's like this yellow. I'm like, what the fuck do you ooze so that everything is yellow? So that's interesting.
I don't think we should answer that question, but I mean, I really have moved on from the joke that my husband's hot in bed, and it's like, no, he just, I literally can't touch this.
Right, can't touch this. So, did you know anything about menopause before all of this happened to you?
Look, the extent of my knowledge of menopause was watching my mother terribly go through it.
Oh, right.
And suffer badly and become exactly what I just described my husband thinks that I've become.
Right.
Because, there was a really hard couple of years there and I was probably 16.
Yeah.
I think. And, wow, mum, where's nice, kind mum gone? like just literally disappeared.
Did she talk about why?
No.
Right.
No. And I imagine how lonely that would have been for her.
Yeah.
How isolating.
And that's because of societal shame at the time, or was she ever good about talking about body stuff?
Yeah, never. No, I definitely come from a family that never really talked about anything, and that's certainly having its own little payoff now for everybody. But so I made up for it by talking about everything. So this pendulum swings, right? Over here, and I'm well over this side.
And have you talked to her about it now?
We talk about it in more or less terms of, she knows what I'm working through at the moment. And of course she relates and wants to be able to talk about her experiences, but our experiences are very different from each other. So it's kind of like it's not a cohesive conversation that necessarily adds much value to either of us, to be honest. I'm not sure. We feel more supported or more frustrated when we walk away from that, but maybe we could talk about it more later. But
yeah, right.
Yeah. It is a very lonely journey. I have to say, I've joined a couple of Facebook groups because, of course, I've learned from the long COVID thing that a support group is quite useful. But equally, I don't know. It's so individual in some ways that I haven't found much camaraderie in it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yet.
Yes, and then for you, you've had that it all at once as well, right? Because when did you have your hysterectomy?
February 2019, and then the last ovary came out last year in March 2021.
Yeah, so that's all quite rapid to then be plunged into the and also you don't even just have vestiges of estrogen because they've gone completely. So yes, as you say, that's a big crash. So
which realistically wasn't until the HRT was very good at the beginning. Wasn't until they took me off that a couple of months ago. And they did warn me that it might take some time for it to really sort of, I thought, to stop 4 days later. I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. A month later, this is terrible. 2 months later, this is horrific.
And so it's just because if you keep taking HRT, then your endo will return no matter what.
Well, not all. This is a very rare situation, apparently. It's very unlucky.
Fuck, basically. You really have had some luck.
Knocking out of the park. Absolutely knocking out of the park.
Yeah. Don't buy lotto tickets. Sorry.
No. But I have lots of other luck. So I have lots of silver linings. So I'm very cognizant of where that sits. And actually I think just finishing on that isolation piece is, of course, don't forget that for my age group, quite a lot of my friends are still having babies or have small children. And so I'm at this really weird kind of I inherited 3 children when I turned 30 who were already sort of pre-made into 4, 6, and 8-year-olds, and now they are 16, 18, and they're older than that, but anyway, so 16, 18 and 20. And now I sort of fit the age group of people who typically have children that age now. My body is at that age, but I am not, and my friends are not. So it's it's very weirdly discombobulating where I'm just I feel like a little bit out on my own a lot of the time on this, and I'm sure it's not the case. It's just that's how it feels.
Do you feel that you want to find some more people that have been through the surgical side of things to talk to?
Yeah, I just recently joined a group of surgical menopause women. There's like 9 of them. So, like, maybe that's all I need. It's a quorum.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I've interviewed
exactly.
a few now for this podcast, definitely. Like one of my besties, she had the BRCA gene. So she had her ovaries removed, and then suddenly bam, and then she can't take HRT because, well, she doesn't want to because of having the BRCA gene. So
Yes,
she had a similar sort of smashing into it all, which was quite full on. Yeah, and I mean, and you still feel that you're grieving not being able to have children still?
I feel like I'll probably grieve that for the rest of my life in some way, but it's not necessarily incredibly obvious. Like it's not bubbling just underneath the surface. Like there's just times where that might just become very clear, and I'll go, oh. But then I'm a silver linings girl. I'm always looking at the balance of these things and go, I have a pretty extraordinary life that allows me to do a lot of really interesting things that, quite frankly, towing a baby around would have been pretty challenging to do that at the same time. And, but maybe that's just part of the justification aspect of things, like when you just you're always, for me, I'm always kind of weighing these things up just to help myself move forward, right? Because I can't get stuck anywhere.
I think that's life too, because especially life with someone who is an optimistic streak, because if you were always dwelling, it would be a lot.
I'm a utopian. I am generally am, and I feel like I have to be. It's the only way I roll.
Yeah. And if this is an insensitive question, just don't answer it or anything like that. But is there, having stepchildren, does this help with that?
Yeah, look, and it's funny because we, in our household, we don't call ourselves steps because it obviously has a branding issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Disney.
Yeah. That's exactly how my eldest talks about it. She'll say, "Fuck you, Disney."
Yeah, which is good.
She's great, and they've always called me their other mother. Pam, their biological mum, is American, so they call her Mom, and I get referred to as Mum or Nini. And I've never not felt maternal with them. I've always felt very protective. They are very much my girls, my daughters, and that's how I refer to them. And no one would ever hear me say anything other than that. They'll never hear me say stepdaughters. They'll hear me say my daughters. And so they've been extraordinary. And I, if you want me to find a moment to help you cry, like when I was going through IVF when we had the second miscarriage, I remember we were down in the Hawke's Bay and I had just heard the news, because the weird thing about IVF is that you generally find out about the miscarriage via data as opposed to trauma that comes second. Not your body, a piece of it is what comes after. They told you that your levels aren't where they're supposed to be and you're to expect a miscarriage to come.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. And anyway, I got the news and I was pretty upset, and I'd gone through to the bedroom and laid down, and Issa was, I don't know, she was maybe 8 or something. Anyway, she crawled up onto the bed and curled up underneath me and basically enveloped me. And then the other 2 had joined, and then Scotty had joined, and then basically everybody enveloped me. And that was like a human pile-on. And Issa just squeaked out, "I hope we'll be enough."
Oh my God, that's so true. Like, tears spring to my eyes immediately. Oh my God.
And of course, this
beautiful.
Is awful. It is beautiful, but it's awful. It's like,
I know. Yeah, like you need to dispel their worry as the time that you're going through something that's so enormous. Yeah, wow. I think that's the first time I've actually cried doing this. Look at that. Yeah, that's that's a lot. I mean, like, because I've said this quite a few times, I have never wanted children, so I don't understand that. But I can empathize because I've seen some of my friends have been like that too. I've got one friend, she didn't manage to have children until she was about 46 6th or something like that. So yeah, so
Mm.
I've seen that drive, and it became so single-minded for her that it
Mm.
was sort of her whole life became about that. And then
Mm.
it eventually happened. And one of my friends from school was the one that knocked her up, as it were, as the doctor. But yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that's something that's great because, a lot of people have fraught relationships with their not steps,
Yeah.
not their chosen
Non-biological children.
chosen children. Right. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Well, I'm not sure if you dexterity choose them so much as they
Yeah,
come as a
right.
package deal.
Yeah.
But it's like, would you like fries with that? Would you like children with that? No.
It's like
Well,
children.
apparently, if you
Yes.
want him, you get that, and so that was
Right.
always the deal. But
Okay.
but I do envy, though, Penny, I have to say that knowledge of what you did or didn't want, that conviction,
Yeah.
is something I am very envious of, because
Yeah.
I the one thing I wasn't obsessed in IVF. I was very particular about it. I said, this is how many goes I'm going to do, and I stuck to it. And because I knew it was going to be hard on my body, and I knew it was going to be hard on my brain. And I mean, that is a reality of the knowledge I've had from endo, etc., and all the things I've been through, that I knew that, pumping my body full of hormones was going to have some sort of really hard edge to it. And there was only so much that could, exist in my world without everything imploding. And that's, nonetheless, even only doing a few rounds of it still had that very challenging aspects of it. And that's, putting it mildly.
Mm.
Thought I was having a stroke one day. That's how bad the symptoms were. I ended up in the hospital because my brain would literally explode.
Right.
Yeah, so I have a lot of admiration for, I don't know whether that admiration is even the right word, but you clearly just had this power of conviction of how you felt about it, and you've honoured that through your life. And that's something that I do with working on a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it's pure. I mean, it sounds luck it's luck in a way that, yeah, and I never tested my body's fertility, my fecundity. I've always felt that that's something that we should do, like when we're 18, like, can we have kids and then we can chill, like if we're worried about birth control and stuff like that, and be prepared for it rather than that emotional upheaval of going through it at whatever time you do. Yes. I had a wonderful question that is
that's welcome to my world. My memory is terrible nowadays. I understand. It's like a goldfish. I'm sorry, what was that? Sorry, what was that?
Occasionally I have done that walking into a room thing, and it's funny because I've heard about this so much. It's like such a, oh God, I hate that. But I've actually kind of enjoyed it. I've been like, I know I was here for something, but this is that thing that people talk about. But I'm not that stressed by that. So I don't know if it'll get worse. If I start forgetting my show lines, I do 75 minutes of dialogue by myself. So that could be fun if I suddenly start forgetting that. But if you don't mind me asking, what sort of menopausal symptoms are you having?
Well, the memory loss is interesting because I've already been through quite a lot of cognitive challenges through long COVID, which, honestly, it was so bad at one point that I thought I was early onset dementia, which was horrifying.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that did lift eventually.
How long did that take to lift?
I had at least 12 solid months of really challenging long COVID, and then kind of edges of it from there. And now that's why I call it ramifications now.
Right.
So like there's these things I can and can't do, but there's things I live with now. And so my life looks different from what it did pre-COVID, but I wouldn't say
lung function and things like that.
Because that's actually generally the least of the issues. Because it's the fallacy that still exists that it's a respiratory disease, and the reality is that the coronavirus of COVID is a vascular disease,
right?
And so it affects our blood vessels, and there's a whole bunch of issues. There's a lot of research going into microclots and the impact that they're having on various organs and sticky blood and the coagulation issues that go with it. But you really did ask me about menopausal symptoms, and I really derailed that. But the point of that is my memory.
It's hard to know the difference.
Well, sometimes, yes, except I did manage to get a sort of a period between times where things, lifted a bit and felt a bit better. It is a lumpy kind of journey. And of course, HRT helped post the surgery of the ovary. And so I felt quite good for a while there until I started feeling quite bad again. And then, of course, now that's come away. So the symptoms now look like the memory loss, which sometimes is horrific, particularly if I'm tired. It's bad. It's different to the long COVID one, I'd suggest. It's more quite specific memory as opposed to sometimes the brain fog feels like there's a wall in your head.
Okay.
And you can't quite lift it. It's in the way of things, as opposed to, I feel with menopause, it's much more, you can't grasp the word that you want to find. and you want to
Right.
pull it out. So
Okay.
it's slightly different for me. Obviously, the heat issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you got lots of
That
fans?
the funny thing is, I've actually got none, and I don't know why this is. I know
Yeah.
there's like the second person 2 days said, "Why don't you have any fans yet?" I was like, "Because there's always a random piece of paper around, and I'm just I need to
Yeah.
buy something glorious."
Yeah, because you can get like Jackie Clark. She called herself a human water feature, so she got a neck. Have you heard of a neck fan? So I hadn't heard of these. It's like a big necklace, but it sits around like this, and then it just blows straight up, like
Okay,
from
I
here. Yes,
definitely need to message Jackie and ask her about
yes.
this situation.
She was like in love with her neck fans, and lots of people I've talked to have got neck fans. So yeah, look, just
Okay, I'm
Google that,
writing this
and you
down.
get yeah,
Neck
do.
fans. Okay, but I am quite new on this part. In fairness, like this is only a few months in of this really terrible part.
Yep.
The sleeplessness is terrible, is really hard, and I don't do well with lack of sleep. It just becomes a self-perpetuating issue. Of course, then there's all the things that went with all the pelvis issues and joint pain. But I'm now on a nerve blocker, which has helped quite a lot. I don't know how long I can stay on that for.
What's that
So
one?
pregabalin.
Oh, okay, right,
Yeah, and it's doing a good job of that,
great,
but it's either that or more surgery. Fun,
right. Oh
and I'm
God.
not that keen. Not that keen.
Right, okay. So, and
Yeah,
you just don't want to try HRT at all in case it brings back more endo again?
basically, it
Yeah,
will. It will. Yeah, hence the surgery conversation. So if I
yeah.
go in and take all the endo out, then maybe. But it's pretty hard for them to say that they got it all because
Mm.
that in itself is quite an extensive operation. Just like pull all those organs out, go through all of them. Is there any cells in here? Like it's pretty
Ugh.
big, and I have a bit of a mess down there.
And did you say you'd had 10 of those already? Is that what you said?
I've had 10 surgeries in the last 10 years. So
Far out.
6 of those have been specific to endo. I've had, cysts, and even since having my hysterectomy, I mean, that ovary they've tried to save a couple of times. My bowel and my bladder were tied to my ovary that was left with scar tissue. It was all nicely pulling it up into one area, and
Right.
by a lot of issues. So there's just there's a lot, but they're all interrelated. That's the funny thing is, like, when I explain it to people, they're like, "Oh my God," and they're like, "Yeah, but they're kind of all the
Mm.
same ilk. They all
Right.
come together as one exacerbated issue that's just continued."
Do you think that's mainly from the endo that's had repercussions all over the show?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And then
Yeah.
endo and COVID meeting each other just had
Yeah, that's like,
enormous ramifications.
never heard of COVID, pushing menopause forward. So, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
there's lots of that. There's
Yeah.
lots and lots. So if you go onto any of the long COVID forums or support groups or any of that kind of stuff, you'll find there's lots and lots and lots of people who've had issues.
And you know what? What
Mm,
gets me is that you've been attacked by anti-vaxxers and people like that
mm,
when you would have done anything to get that fucking vaccine before all of this shit happened to you. And something like being vaccinated halves your chances of long COVID. So these
yeah.
people are perpetuating absolute nonsense for stuff that would actually save them for going through the shit that you've had to go through so
Oh
that you
yeah.
can be an example for us to learn from is very galling.
I think that that's what's most galling, of course. And I have empathy because people fall into algorithmic rabbit holes, and I understand that the way the world is organized, and it certainly sets a lot of people up for failure when it comes to disinformation.
Mm,
However, what I do find galling are the people who infiltrate our support groups. They lie to get into the support groups to then spread their beliefs, and their beliefs are that long COVID is created by the vaccine. And I'm sorry, I have a small issue with that. It's called timeline.
yes,
And that is,
exactly.
I got COVID well before there was a vaccine, so that's just a
Yes.
bit of bullshit. Um,
Jesus.
and they kind of don't know what to say at that point.
Yeah.
And it's the end of their kind of debate, and then they kind of go off on some other tangent on something else. But
Oof.
yeah, it's hard because the whole point is that we're trying to create a safe space for people who aren't recovered, who are
Mm.
trying to just get through the day and are really struggling, and most of them are kind of are struggling to make ends meet, and their relationships are falling apart, and they don't understand how it is that everybody else around them is just like seems to have got up and got over having COVID, and yet here they are lying in bed 23 hours a day.
Mm.
um
Have they
yeah
done any work? Because I heard there was some things maybe around genetic markers for indications for long COVID.
and it's an ongoing work that's into that.
Right.
Yeah, so they look. I think a lot of those sort of research studies will end up, over the next few years, they'll learn a lot more What I can tell you is that we know that with COVID, a lot of genetics get turned on. So people who had predispositions for things, the virus essentially activates them.
Wow. So it acts like a hormone.
I don't know. Yeah, and this is where my doctor credentials probably will start falling down. But
yeah, well, because estrogen activates parts of your body to do certain things. So that's kind of
certainly. Well, you're right. It's all in the what's it called? The thing in your head, not your brain.
I was about to say the brain. I mean, I'm no doctor,
I
walked
right into that. No. Yes, the hormone center in the brain.
Is that the hypothalamus?
Thank you. I wanted to call it the elephant, but yes.
Right. That's what. Right. Okay. Yeah. The elephant in the brain is the hypothalamus. Right. Yeah. Yes.
And,
okay.
And also, it's the mitochondria that it gets impacted, and of course, that is a part of the carrying of these things around. So,
what gives us energy?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where a lot of the disruption for people is in the mitochondria. So
right, okay. So have you found any sort of, because one of my things I hate is sort of snake oil and $200 bottles of pills that do fuck all and stuff like that.
Got a whole cupboard of them.
Right. So you're like, let's get that placebo effect if we can, etc. So have you found anything that worked, or
are we talking about menopause or are we talking about long COVID?
Yes, I mean, God, both. Let's go with both.
I had extraordinary results from keto.
Great.
Yeah, so anti-inflammatory essentially is the way that I looked at that. I had a really great coach that I worked with, and it aided by the fact that my body is rejecting everything, so it made it much easier to do this big, take everything out sort of approach.
Elimination diet.
Elimination, yeah, thank you. And so that was very, very good results, but I have found it very hard to do that in menopause. My brain is just not as capable of the discipline that may be required, that possibly I could then, because I had greater reason to, because I had pins and stabbing pains through my joints all the time, so I was so much more motivated to. With this, I feel like there's an aspect of comfort eating.
Yeah, right.
that I can't help myself on. I'm pretty good though. Like I just generally don't have a lot of sugar in my life, and it does help. And I'm pretty good on certain things. Like I don't have a lot of takeaways. I eat a lot of fresh food. But I swear by cranial osteo.
Oh, really?
I love my osteopath. And interesting enough, it's not. I mean, a lot of people don't know much about it, and it can come across as a bit woo-woo, but I guess giving it some sort of endorsement. There's a respiratory doctor out of the UK, Asad Khan, and he got really bad COVID and then ended up with long COVID and found himself the only kind of his peers that was still suffering and couldn't go back to work. And he was a top Manchester University doctor, and so of course ended up leading part of the UK response around long COVID. And he now educates other doctors at respiratory departments, etc., about how they handle patients, etc. And he put up on a slide one day in a presentation I was in that, keto and osteo and acupuncture. And I said to him, wow, can you imagine saying to yourself 5 years ago that those are the things that you would recommend? And I said, this is what happens when traditional medicine doesn't listen to patients about what's happening with their bodies, because then they become outliers and they go and seek alternative remedies. And he found himself in that category. And yet the most amount of improvement he saw was from those things.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah. And so I love my osteo, just absolutely. I really notice if I have a week missing, it just really rebalances everything I do. And then a variety of things. I've got some Chinese herbs that my acupuncturist gives me that I feel it reduces some of the heat. But does it not?
Yeah, placebo effect is real, it's real. And if it works and if you feel that it's making a difference, that's it. As long as that's the thing is when people try and cash in on that by charging huge amounts of money is when it becomes a little less pleasing.
Yeah. I buy that. The thing is, if someone had told me to try this, which they did, I genuinely tried everything once or sometimes twice, just to make sure. And
because you're desperate.
Yeah, absolutely. But then you do get a little bit sick of people going straight into their remedies without actually asking you perhaps what you've done or whether you want to hear about it.
I've had quite a few emails pitching podcast guests now.
Mm.
And just by the way, I have this whole thing that I'm selling with it sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
you clearly haven't listened to a single one of my podcasts because you would know that I'm not usually about endorsing stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel that energy, because I think one of the things I found with being such a visible spokesperson as well is I would get a lot of feedback, and it was always the zinc and the vitamin C, and like I'm all over the zinc and the vitamin C. I don't need your 3-page endorsement on it as to why I should do it, and then the how have you got my phone number continued harassment just to make sure I know this message to be true. It was generally a large amount of mansplaining I found.
Oh, I
Given to
see, I
me.
see, I
But,
see.
yeah.
Do you think, given what's happened since you did that Instagram post and where you are, like I know that you've spun it a lot into some positivity, which is great, and
Yeah.
spreading messages, which is great, but would you have been as vocal knowing what you know now?
Oh, it's a good question. Do you always have those things that you like say to yourself, if I could just be a little bit more demure, if I could just be a little bit less
I've
me, if
I've
I
never
could
thought
just
that,
be
but yeah.
no, exactly, exactly. That is my point. That is a thing that lasts for all of about 5 seconds. And like,
Yeah,
no, I couldn't. That would be
yeah,
terrible. No,
yeah.
no. So I look. I think the reality is that these paths sometimes pick you, and then you have to kind of make the most of what you have in front of you. And I certainly did not want to become famous, certainly not for some sort of weird parallel universe that seemed to open up in early 2020 where the world fell into.
Yeah.
It became this next.
Yeah, I remember you being on television way back then, and I think you were the first person I'd ever heard use the words long COVID or know about it. So you were definitely very visible with that. And I think that it was great that you were, because to me, and the thing is, that was the thing I was most concerned about. So, because have you caught Omicron?
Yes.
You did.
Well, I don't know if it was Omicron, in fairness. No
Oh,
one really knows what their
well,
variant is at the moment. So
true, true.
I got sick again. So I've been so far twice. The
Twice,
second
right?
time was in March of this year,
This year.
in France. Also ended up very sick, and we think it was likely the new BA5 variant.
All
No,
right.
the new one, because
Okay.
it came with the gastro. I got very, very sick, and there's a really unfortunate story of how I ended up having to claim a really lovely pair of Juliet Hogan cashmere pants on my travel insurance as a result of being stuck in a French rural hospital with no toilet with the gastro COVID.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was
Were you?
really not funny. It makes
No.
much funnier now, but not funny
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just had my first because I've had an ongoing vulvodynia issue, which is interesting because,
I'm
and
sorry,
I've
what's that?
vulvodynia is an ongoing pain in your vulva, a burning vulval pain that I've had since the 15th of December. I can tell you exactly because I got in a car to drive to Christchurch and then went, oh, that's a bit funny. And it's just been with me ever since. And I've been on amitriptyline and I've just been coming off that recently because that hasn't worked as well. But for me, diet is another thing. So decided I'm going to try physiotherapy first. So yeah, it's pelvic physio. So I just basically had a physiotherapist with her hand up my fanny for about half an hour, just pushing different knots of tension, apparently. And again, quite funny in hindsight, actually quite funny at the time as well.
Literally an internal situation,
Yeah.
not external. Wow.
Yeah, literally.
How uncomfortable was that?
It was just fucking weird. I mean, like some
Yeah.
people have provoked vulvodynia, which is if you touch, it's really painful. I don't have that. So I just have a low level hum of constant burning. Ray. So that didn't really hurt per se, but it was just very weird. Very, very, and I've bought this thing
I have
called
questions, but I'm not sure they're suitable for a podcast.
Oh no, bring it,
No.
bring it, bring it. But I bought something called a Therawand. This Therawand is basically, it's like big and it's like a crank.
Oh yeah, I've had that lots of times.
Oh, right. Yeah. No. Yes, I haven't tried it yet. It arrived. My husband unboxed it for me to show me. And I was like, oh, it'll be exciting when I get home and shove that up there and have a look and see how that goes. So, yeah.
Can you make that a fun time at the same time?
That's why I said I'm just going to wind myself up and go for a drive with my crank. Yeah, I don't know. I'll see because it was.
I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds that sounds very uncomfortable and concerning.
Yeah, but this is what it is, the absolute lack of research, information. Apparently it's something like up to 15% of women have had vulvodynia, but hardly anybody talks about it. So,
wow. Yeah, that makes sense though, doesn't it? Because like that is exactly how it rolls for everything. I mean, how is it endometriosis is so freaking prevalent and yet so misunderstood and so not talked about? How is it that I can go into having a hysterectomy thinking it is a solution to endometriosis. It's not. And I can't say that loud enough. The problem is I say enough things at the moment. I'm saying too many things. I'm trying to wait for the right moment to have this conversation with the world.
Yeah.
And anyone who feels like listening. It's like, because I see these women who, who are really struggling with endo, and, they're going to their gynecologist and they're walking away saying, I've had enough of my uterus, you're out, you're leaving, and I'm going to get this relief that comes with it. And I walked straight into it thinking that that's what's going to happen as well. And in reality is I ended up having several surgeries later after my hysterectomy, because it wasn't the end of that. And it's really not uncommon. Like the growing endo on the HRT, that's unfortunate. But also it's not uncommon either, but it's also not discussed. And I didn't know that scar tissue would be an issue, that scar tissue will cause pain, that scar tissue would potentially be why I have a frozen pelvis now. Like I just would like to have perhaps known that before I started yanking out more organs.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they used to just yank out organs for no good reason at all. Like, not that long ago with the prevalence of hysterectomies in the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. Yeah. I mean, the amount of women that I've interviewed on this podcast that have had endo is huge. Huge. Yeah. So I've just been incredibly fortunate with that in my life.
I do feel like that what happens in Aotearoa is a lot of the, the really leading edge stuff takes a long time to trickle down to here.
Right.
So I've often wondered as if I had access into what happens in some of the hospitals in America, would there be some kind of new fandangled ways to handle this that potentially, I don't know. I don't know. And I feel disempowered on this subject. I feel quite disempowered on it. And that's an uncomfortable feeling in itself. It also feels a bit late. It's gone now.
And I think that's it with menopause, because particularly for Generation X, we're used to having the information at our fingertips that we thought that, but then suddenly to have all of this world of female hormone stuff and things that have been kept from us, I think that's been kind of the lightning rod for lots of us going, fuck this, let's get some information out there about it.
Well, I think this is also, the whole do your own research thing is partially problematic too.
Yes.
Like, how do we ensure we've got trusted sources, and how do we ensure that the information that we have put in front of us isn't going to make things worse for us as well? So, I mean, particularly when you're such a vulnerable time. Like,
Yeah, but it's about checking the veracity of your source and the the integrity of you, like YouTube. Not YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk to around menopause or long COVID or anything like that?
I'm about to embark on one new treatment on the menopausal front. So one of the symptoms I didn't mention, which I probably should, because if my husband was listening, he'd probably say this is the biggest one from his point of view, is lack of sex drive. Yeah. And we don't talk about that enough, right?
Yep.
And it is definitely like the tap's been turned off. It's broken. The faucet no longer works.
I mean, it's frozen, right?
Yeah, like it's very deeply uncomfortable, and that makes no fun for anybody. The grimace on my face is not exactly sexy.
No. So you're getting some testosterone, are you?
Well, yeah. So if I could have been asked waiting longer at the pharmacy who didn't have my script today, I've been trying it over this weekend, but I'll be picking it up on Monday.
Great.
And I did have to go get the blood test first, and I was on the lower end of things, so she was open to it. But I didn't know this to be true. Did you know this, that we have more testosterone? Well, we're supposed to have more testosterone in our bodies than we have estrogen. It's just that men have more testosterone than we do, and we have more estrogen. So, but becomes a whole, testosterone in our minds is like it's a small amount of what we do, and estrogen's the big. It's actually testosterone is more. We have more of that when we do estrogen.
Yep.
And so when we go into menopause and our testosterone drops, most people don't check it, and it doesn't seem to be something that's readily talked about. My endocrinologist has not pulled it up. My GP didn't pull it up. I pulled it up with her.
Right. Yes. And also sometimes testosterone, you see, because I was talking to Anna Sophia, who is a therapist around this area, and she had been reading because of, Dr. Louise Newsom in the UK, who's a total menopause guru, talking about testosterone is also very good for mental acuity and things like that as well. So that you might get that as a side effect of that. Also, my
Brilliant.
friend who's a trans man started taking testosterone and said it was just like the shit. Just suddenly felt so much, like I don't know,
I
maybe
got
feels
it.
yeah, exactly. So maybe that will come as well as other comings and goings as well. But yeah, so it can actually be various different things. So fingers
Yeah.
crossed. Yeah, as well as the sex drive situation. But
And possibly, if you get it wrong, a very large and engorged clitoris, as I was told. So,
yes, you
we're going
can.
to. So, I'm bridging this line somehow.
And I think you get a bit of hair where you put it behind your leg as well, something like that
Oh,
too.
you
But
see, put it on your labia. Makes a lot
oh,
more sense. I'm like, well, that does make a lot more sense, doesn't it? So, if you put it on your leg, you're going to grow hair on the leg.
right. But do you want to
Like,
hair on your? Yeah, there is
well, I
some
mean,
hair on your lip.
well, like I say, I can deal with that somewhere down there. I mean, maybe the top bit. I like
Right,
it.
right.
You
So they
know,
said to put it there. Because the other thing that testosterone, you see, because when young women start taking birth control, it can actually ruin their testosterone levels, which will plummet and give them vulvodynia, which
that's
is
interesting.
so some
Yes.
young women get provoked vulvodynia, like a burning pain, because they went on birth control and it suppressed their testosterone.
I
Yeah.
know, and I try not to preach I try not to preach anything. I try to add science rather than preaching around, just I guess caution. Like with the three girls in our house, I have said, look, I got put on hormones at 14 because I had a very wayward period, and that was the first thing that they did is they put me onto the pill. I kind of wish, to answer your earlier question of what could I go back in time and change, that would be one of them. To be
Yeah, right.
like let my period just kind of do its thing, support my other things around it. But they had one wisdom at the time, and that was it.
Yeah.
And who knows what kind of
And that would have been your endo.
yeah.
That's what was causing that.
Yeah, I was 30. I was 31 years old when I was finally diagnosed with endo. I was apologizing to the surgeon as I was being wheeled in for wasting their time. And then they went in, they put me under, and then took me straight back out. I woke up and they went, and I went, how did it go? And they're like, we didn't do anything because you actually have a lot of it. You're a stage 4. We weren't really expecting that. And so you're going to have to book back in for a much, much larger procedure. And that's not what we're doing today. So then I had to wait 18 months.
Oh, God. Fuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Because my insurance company wouldn't cover it. Because when I was 14, I went to the doctor and the doctor said, because I had painful periods and because it had been on record that I had symptoms at that young age and they had a record of it, that was considered a pre-existing condition, even though I wasn't diagnosed with it.
Oh, that's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, that was super fun. But
speaking of fun, do you have a fun fact, out of the box fun fact for us about menopause? That's right. Or about your life.
Didn't I just give you a whole heap?
Yes, well, you did. You gave us the testosterone one, but if you can't think of one, that's absolutely fine.
Can I use that as my fun fact?
Yes. We'll do a retrospective fun fact.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still learning all the fun facts and none of them are particularly fun yet. They're still in the not quite funny, eventually this will be a funny joke kind of added to the memoir, but right now I'm still living it.
Yeah, you're in the middle of it. Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, that's it. No one knows how long it's going to last. That's the thing about menopause. It's so unknown. But so many people come out the other side and say that they love it. They love where they're at. They love the renewed vigor. They like a lot of the brain fog can go away. All these sorts of things. I mean, I haven't experienced hardly anything yet. I thought vulvodynia was menopause, but apparently it's probably not. So I have no idea what's going to happen to me. But fingers crossed. And I just want to say thank you very much for being so prepared to be so open about everything that you've gone through, particularly with long COVID and everything as well, because you got some bullshit from fucking idiots, let's be honest. But you've done so much for raising the awareness of that. And for me personally was a big motivator. I would have got vaccinated anyway, but because I'm a singing, dancing person for a living, I was really quite scared of that. So I did whatever I could. And I don't want to say holding you up as an example of what could go wrong, but
I'm pleased I could be your lesson.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much. But you were prepared to share that with everybody, and I think that's a big deal. So thank you very much for that.
I'm sure. I mean, look, honestly, I believe very clearly in the value of once you know better, you do better. Absolutely love Brené Brown and the power of vulnerability of which she preaches. And so I guess I'm a student of that. And so I try to live that value wherever I can, sometimes to my own detriment. But most of the time, there are many, many silver linings. And I believe that, lots have come my way as a result of of doing that. So I appreciate the appreciation. But I guess I can look at it as I know you've paid it forward in lots of ways, and that's how it rolls, right?
Yeah. I mean, like
Yeah.
for me, lockdown was, 4 months of shit as a performer, but then I started doing this, and then I wouldn't be
Yeah.
talking to lots of fabulous women, trans individuals without doing this. And, and it's so true about being vulnerable, being prepared to be vulnerable can take you to places like particularly on stage that like the first time I did a poem and I cried about an ex-boyfriend, I fucking hated it. And then everybody was like, oh, I loved that bit when you
Yeah,
cried.
right.
And I was
Yes.
like, really? Because I really hated that. So I'm much better at that now myself too. And so there is definitely power and vulnerability that way for connection, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
on that
absolutely.
note, I think that's a
Yes.
lovely place to end so you can go back to your life and doing things. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your life story and all of that sort of thing. And good fucking luck, I say from here.
Thanks. I'll go buy that big neck fan.
Yes.
Off to Google.
Do that. Okay. Bye-bye.
Ka kite.
So that was the fabulously honest and not at all demure Jenene Crossan, and happily so. Social media can be such a force for good for connection and sharing proper information and support groups. But oh my God, so much misinformation, so much attacking of anyone prepared to put their head above the parapet. And it disgusts me the level of vitriol, hatred, and personal attacks they get, which is why if I disagree with anyone across the political divide, I always try not to make it personal, not to lower yourself to this petty levels of horrible discourse. So let's all try to do that. And at the same time, let's send Jenene some collective healing vibes to her scar tissues, be they literal or metaphorical, and say thanks so much for furthering the understanding of long COVID and all its ramifications, including on menopause. Thanks as always for listening, Showy Ovarians. Thanks to my 7 patrons, you spunky people, who help pay for my podcast hosting every month. If you'd like to help, head to Patreon, search my name, and you too could assist. Thanks to the fabulous audiences I've had here at Centrepoint as well, and thanks to all the staff behind the scenes, Kate Louise, Ricky, Bell, my technician, and Martin, who pays the bills, and everybody else. It's just been so delightful to be here. I'm looking forward to heading to Wellington in a month for a month of shows at Circa. Please do buy tickets, 24 shows. It's a lot. And please, for fuck's sake, Wellington, warm up. Anyway, apart from that, this is Penny Ashton and her hunka burning hot pink bits signing off for yet another week of Showy Ovaries, reminding you all to stay juicy, everybody. Ka kite.